Hi, it's Penny here. Just another short video with regards to the topic of trauma and the energy of trauma. And I want to start with a quote by a Dr. Peter Levine. He's the developer of somatic experiencing, the founder of the Ergos Institute of Somatic Education and Somatic Experiencing Institute. And he has a very well-known quote, which is what I want to talk about today. He says that trauma is perhaps the most avoided, ignored, belittled, denied, misunderstood, and untreated cause of human suffering. I really resonate with that quote for a number of reasons, and I know from my own personal experiences with trauma that I carried a lot of shame with me. I didn't talk about the traumatic events that had happened in my life. I often put on a mask to pretend that I was a-okay and doing great, and the reality was I was far from doing great. And at that time, and at various times in my life when I've been completely sideswiped, laid flat, knocked out, not literally, but may as well have been, because of trauma that I've been suffering. I've hidden away and definitely not shared or talked about what I was actually going through. Even in one of my really traumatic parts of my life where I was subjected to domestic violence, quite severe and prolonged domestic violence, a lot of people in my life that were close to me had no idea that I was actually going through it, because we feel a shame, and we, as Peter says, we deny it. Trauma is indeed, you mention the word trauma to people, and most people aren't willing to engage in a discussion on it for whatever reason. Trauma to me is almost like a swear word. People recoil when they hear you talk about it. And I'm someone who's really, really passionate about talking about trauma, because I believe that everybody should be free from the suffering that does come from trauma. As Peter quite accurately puts, it's the most misunderstood and untreated cause of human suffering. Why suffer? Why suffer? We need to be able to talk about trauma freely. We need to be able to remove the stigma and the shame that we carry around trauma, because that's where the true healing happens. Being able to talk about it, being able to share our own experiences, it's amazing, and I didn't talk about anything for a very long time, but the more that I talk openly about the trauma that I've been through, it's amazing the amount of people that can actually relate, the amount of messages I've had privately, or people will reach out to me, or they'll comment about, they've been through similar things, by sharing our truth, by sharing their reality, not just all the good and yummy stuff in life. That's how we connect with another. That's how we can, support others to know that they're not alone, that it's not their shame to carry. But also, really, really importantly, and this is why I do the work that I do, that it's possible to heal from trauma. It's possible to shift the energy, the energetic imprint within the physical body that trauma creates. It's actually possible to shift that. Why choose to suffer and to live with that energy within you, holding you back? Like, I know it held me back. It was physically debilitating for me, because as an energy sitting within my body, it caused disease, discomfort, and disability. Why choose to live like that when you don't have to? So yeah, I'm really passionate about trauma not being like a swear word, trauma not being avoided, ignored, belittled, denied, or misunderstood, as Peter says, and definitely not untreated. And there's many, many ways, depending upon the type of trauma that you've been through. There's a lot of different ways that you can shift the energy of trauma and to actually heal from the trauma that you've been through. I've had my fair share. Recently, someone reflected to me that I had had a lot of trauma in my life, and I hadn't actually sat and considered it in that way. Probably because it's been something I've been working on. My personal growth and development and my healing is something that I've been working on for 11 years. It's now the area of work that I offer to others. So I hadn't sort of reflected on that. But even if you had a small trauma in comparison to, say, somebody who's been to war, that doesn't make that trauma that's small insignificant, because it does create that energetic imprint. But it also affects how you show up, how you respond to things, what you're triggered by, your self-esteem, your physical health, your mental, emotional well-being. It doesn't matter the size of the trauma or the type of the trauma. The fact is, it's trauma, and it's important to shift and heal from that trauma so that you can be free from it and live to your fullest expression of yourself. So I wanted to jump in very quickly and start with that quote, because I think that Dr. Peter Levine, and that quote alone, and I mean, this is his life's work, working with trauma and healing from trauma. But I think that quote is so succinct in summing up the attitude towards trauma that needs to change, because nobody on this earth should be walking around carrying trauma and the energy of trauma. We all deserve not to be suffering.